Morning. Welcome to all of you. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas season to you and your families. First, let me take a moment to introduce some of the individuals behind me. As you can see, we have quite the team up here and a massive show of force, frankly, about this operation. Let me introduce some of the folks you're going to hear from this morning. First, ATF Special Agent in Charge, Sean Benedict. Chief Larry Boone of the Norfolk Police Department. Chief K.L. Wright of the Chesapeake Police Department, behind me. Chesapeake Commonwealth's Attorney, Nancy Parr. Norfolk Commonwealth's Attorney, Greg Underwood. Lieutenant Eric Penry of the Virginia State Police. FBI Special Agent in Charge, Martin Colbreth. DEA Resident Agent in Charge, Patrick Hardig. And Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal, Sherry Anand. We're here today to announce the results of Operation High Tide, a major anti-violent crime effort here in Hampton Roads that to date has resulted in 20 criminal convictions for firearm and narcotics offenses. Through Operation High Tide, federal, state, and local authorities succeeded in holding parasitic elements of our community accountable for firearms and narcotics trafficking. Armed criminals are the principal players involved in the deadly cycles of drug turf battles and gang conflict. As detailed in the scores of statements of facts that recount these individual defendants' felonious conduct, these armed drug dealers represent the dregs of the Hampton Roads community. People who bring multiple children to drug deals, use populated stores, restaurants, gas stations, and apartments where law-abiding members of society who are just trying to get through the week, they use those as their area of distribution. Not content to simply sell narcotics, many also made selling firearms part of their business. The illicit guns seized, many of which are on display in front of us, included high-capacity magazines, illegally modified long guns, and many others that could have killed innocent bystanders. This operation, High Tide, just like the natural phenomena, helped to clean and purge the polluted areas of our community. I can't emphasize enough how appreciative I am of the federal, state, and local law enforcement partnership that this operation made. This partnership, which has been forged in Hampton Roads, has resulted in what you see before you today. Each officer, deputy, or special agent involved in this case put themselves directly in harm's way by getting close to armed drug and firearms dealers in order to build the case and ultimately protect the public. As you all know, we recently lost 5 officers in 5 days last week. 2 in Texas, 1 in New Jersey, 1 in Arkansas, and 1 in Alabama. Let's never forget to say thank you to our law enforcement partners, understanding that they put their lives on the line to protect our communities. Further, this operation is emblematic of Attorney General Barr's Project Guardian, which was announced last month and which focuses on firearms used during narcotics trafficking and the trafficking of firearms themselves. I'm proud to tout the efforts of Operation High Tide as a prime example of Project Guardian, which means to use federal, state, and local resources collectively to address violent crime. That effort, from the brave men and women in law enforcement and the organizations you see represented behind me, we seized over 75 firearms, taking them off the streets and out of the hands of criminals. Further, law enforcement seized a massive amount of deadly drugs, including heroin, cocaine, crack, fentanyl, acetylfentanyl, all of which had a street value of over $1 million. We also seized over $500,000 in cash. Based upon the Attorney General's call to action under Project Guardian and EDVA's commitment to this region, let me be clear, we're not going anywhere. We will leverage all of the resources you see behind me to root out the vermin of armed drug dealers in this community. There's more to come, and if you're one of those drug pushers or firearms traffickers, your neighbors and the honest working members of this community are fed up. We will be relentless in our pursuit of justice. I now ask my good friend and partner across the Commonwealth, Special Agent in Charge Sean Benedict of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Bureau, to come up. Thank you, sir.
Morning, everybody. This investigation today focused on the most violent offenders in the Chesapeake, Norfolk, and Portsmouth communities. By working together with all of our partners, the streets are now safer. We now know there are fewer crime guns in the Tidewater area. Homicide and gang activity, firearms trafficking, all of these things that ATF and our partners will not tolerate and want to see completely eliminated from our communities. This case is a prime example of the kind of investigation ATF is committed to working through Project Guardian, the Attorney General's signature investigative measure we're trying to implement here in the Commonwealth, alongside our partners in the United States Attorney's Office. We seek to keep guns out of the hands of violent offenders like these defendants by stopping firearms trafficking and strong purchasers. We are proud of all the hard work of our investigators. I want to take a moment to thank the ATF agents that were primary on this investigation. Edward Winkelspeck, Chip Banks, and Dan Beasley, thank you. I want to make sure that I recognize those folks that did everything they could and continue to do to make sure every one of these defendants have been brought to justice. Thank you.
Chief.
Good morning, everyone. Over the years, the Norfolk Police Department has developed a strong partnership with the ATF and the U.S. Attorney's Office, which has led to several very successful operations in an effort to prevent illegal guns and drugs from entering our communities. In 2017 and 2018, respectively, the City of Norfolk realized a double-digit reduction in violent crime. Contributing factors were Operation Riptide and Operation Sand Dragon, both of which involve federal law enforcement agencies. Operation High Tide is the latest collaboration with ATF that focused on illegal narcotics and firearms. I want to highlight that when we combine resources, the long arm of the law is further stretched. As we know, criminals don't recognize city boundaries. This collective effort does not only benefit Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Chesapeake, but it benefits the Hampton Road region as a whole. I'd like to thank the women and men of the ATF, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Chesapeake Police Department, the Norfolk Police Department, and the state police who worked so hard on this operation to make it a success. Now, we recognize that the battle to remove illegal narcotics and firearms from our communities is never ending. However, the partnerships between our local, state, and federal agencies are never ending as well. I want to underscore that we are not going to tolerate illegal drug activity and gun violence in our cities. We're going to continue to collaborate. We're going to be surgically focused through intelligence-led investigations and resolute to bring about positive change in our communities and the region of Hampton Roads. I will yield to Chief Kelvin Wright.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning. First, I want to say thank you to our partners in law enforcement, namely ATF, FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, the Virginia State Police, Norfolk PD, Portsmouth PD, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and certainly the Chesapeake Commonwealth Attorney's Office. The results of this joint operation, which resulted in removal of multiple firearms out of the hands of people who cannot legally possess them, sell, or use them for criminal purposes, was the main focus of this multi-jurisdictional effort. It should not come as a surprise to anyone that, coupled with the illegal possession of or acquiring of weapons illegally, we seized nearly $1 million in illegal drugs and narcotics and over $500,000 in cash. We in law enforcement know all too well the strong connection between illegal drugs, illegal firearms, and the proceeds of illegal activity associated with guns and drugs. Not to mention the violence, destruction, and devastation that go hand in hand in altering the lives of many innocent people in our communities. It is the operations like these that involve diverse, committed law enforcement partners to come up with strategies to address problems facing our vulnerable communities that have far too long had to endure violent crime. So, to this end, I want to thank our law enforcement partners for your collective efforts to help stem the tide of crime and bring to justice those who wreak havoc and bring death and devastation to our communities. This operation, like others, should let those who are engaged in trafficking of firearms know that we will continue to bring our considerable resources upon those who may think they are beyond the focus of law enforcement to justice. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The level of cooperation between the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal agencies, the state police, local law enforcement, and my office was outstanding during this operation. This operation proves without a doubt that localities and the federal government can and should work together when the safety of our citizens is at risk. We all want the violence in our communities to stop. We also recognize that that is a huge goal, and it will take everyone's effort to do so. When someone is robbed, shot, or assaulted, then law enforcement reacts appropriately. The local law enforcement and state police, they're on the streets every day reacting to crime that is happening, that has happened. What this project, what this operation was about was being proactive and preventing violence. Because that is where we are going to succeed, is if we can prevent it. And when you take off the streets this many weapons and these many drugs, then that is one step forward to preventing violence. So I look forward to have my long-standing cooperation with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Norfolk and in Newport News and all of Eastern District, and the federal agencies and the state police. And the focus is prevention of violence, because we don't want to continue to see our citizens become the victim of a violent crime. Thank you.
All right. Well,
Good morning. When we collaborate with our law enforcement partners, we take more guns off the street. We make our community safer, and we save lives. I'd like to thank our many law enforcement collaborators in this effort. Thank you.
I think, as you can see, as you've heard from everybody, federal, state, and local collaboration isn't just a talking point. This is proof positive of what happens, and we can't do it. The feds can't do it alone. I think the locals are always stronger when we partner along with the state police. With that, we're happy to take some questions.
Can you tell us how long this operation lasted and what the time span in which you've made this major seizure?
Sure. This operation, as many of you and the viewers at home may be aware, you don't just kind of stumble into something like this. It takes a lot of boots on the ground effort. This is an effort that spanned multiple months and then resulted in arrests thereafter. So without getting into the specifics of it, I think it's fair to say you've got anywhere from a 6 to 9 month lead time through investigation, as the individuals that you can read about in publicly filed documents. A lot of those individuals sold guns and sold narcotics, and so we had to set up deals, make those deals happen, make arrests, which I don't think we can underestimate just how dangerous something like this is when you're buying guns and you're infiltrating these drug distribution organizations in an area. Then you're having to go arrest armed individuals. So it's a real testament to our law enforcement partners how they put themselves at risk.
Can you talk about, the key is this group and this force. Can you touch on how much work this takes? I mean, I assume this is round the clock.
Yeah, I will give my comments, but then I want you to hear from some of the law enforcement partners, the gun-carrying law enforcement partners. Yes, this takes a massive amount of coordination. You've got to coordinate about who's in whose backyard, who is doing what. You have to mitigate risk as much as possible. We don't just send individuals into harm's way and hoping for the best. We try and mitigate that risk as much as possible. Let me turn it over to the experts who can explain a little bit more about these types of law enforcement operations.
Sure thing. It all starts with our partnerships with the police department. All the intelligence in Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Norfolk comes from the police department, the communities that they serve, and that's integral to starting these cases. It's intelligence-led policing. Our targets are based off of what we learn about individual communities. we try to get as many of these guns off the street as possible, and I want to emphasize the case is not over. There's an extra phase 2, phase 3 coming forward where these guns came from, right? Mr. Terwilliger's office and the U.S. Attorney's office is committed to prosecuting straw purchasers, so most of these guns came from people that were prohibited. They got those guns from people that bought them legally, and so we're going to investigate fully and take those people and bring them to justice as well. But I want to ask the chief to come up here from Norfolk just to talk about the partnerships and how they develop, and none of this happens without our partnership with local law enforcement.
So as I said previously, you know, we've had a long-standing relationship with our federal partners. One of the things that I embraced when I became chief in December of 2016, we had a operation going on at the time that really propelled us into some really declining crime trends that continue through 2017 and 2018 that are continuing today. I can't underscore enough that it's important for us as local law enforcement to interface with our state partners as well as our federal partners, because we just don't have the resources to do it ourselves. And I know you've heard that a million times, but it's incredibly true. Any other questions?
Where did you said Chesapeake, Norfolk, and Portsmouth is where all these guns were recovered?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think it was said that there were 20 convictions so far. Were those all at the federal level, or was it a breakdown of some state cases, some federal cases, and if so, where did those?
I'm going to surmise it was a little bit of everything, but I'm going to allow.
Sure. So the 20 convictions that I referenced, those were all federal convictions, but it has been a complete effort with our Commonwealth's attorneys partners. If they'd like to address that, that's fine, Nancy, or good? Okay. Yeah, the 20 convictions we're talking about today are federal, and we can get you a list of those. It'll be in our press release that we put out, exactly what the charges were. You'll see in there, if you take the time to look through those statements of facts, you had, a father and son, or father and two sons who were distributing narcotics. You had individuals moving fentanyl, and as you all know, it's a couple grains of fentanyl is enough to kill a law enforcement officer or a user. So this is serious. It's not just the number of firearms and the number of defendants. That in and of itself is pretty staggering. It's the drugs they were moving and the places they were doing it. These areas where you'll see in the statements of facts, the restaurants, the convenience stores, the apartment complexes. This was happening out in a community where, can you imagine, taking your children to the bus stop when somebody's coming down here with a street howitzer, doing a deal, as we saw, just the horrific violence, that goes along with all of this. Any other questions?
I have a question. Obviously, a lot of weapons here. Was there something that was recovered that kind of stunned you all?
Let me turn it over to law enforcement. Well, I'll answer for myself. You've got a high-capacity magazine there at the end that goes with a 9mm. I mean, that thing is jutting so far outside that small Glock firearm. That I think that makes quite a statement. You've got a sawed-off shotgun that's illegal because the barrel's cut off and the bottom is cut off, so it can be easily concealed. That is an extremely dangerous weapon that, loaded and used properly, can kill a lot of people. But let me turn it over to ATF because they've seen a lot more guns than I have.
Sure. There's some quality guns here, and there's just some guns that don't belong in anybody's home for any purposes other than killing, shooting, protecting your drug trade. These guns are not high quality, they're cheap to buy, and that concerns me because you take out of context, home defense or hunting or proud gun ownership. Some of these guns are not any of those. They're used to perpetrate violence on our streets and make our communities so unsafe that we have to get a group of individuals like this together to combat that. So we're going to continue to do that. Any illegal guns that we see is going to take all of our investigative efforts to bring to bear those responsible for violence in our communities.
So, for me, personally, I don't care about how exotic the gun is. You guys report every night throughout Hampton Roads, someone getting shot or killed. And a lot of times it's not the sexy guns, it's the plain Janes. My concern is how do we control illegal guns getting in the wrong hands? And there are systems in place that we can improve upon, but that's not my role. I'll simply put it out there for you all to do a little bit of journalism. Thank you.
Let me, just before we finish up, let me also just say thank you to the Marshal Service and our other partners. When individuals get arrested, they're obviously innocent until proven guilty, so I want to thank our prosecutors who are to my right, your left down there, who they're the ones who, after the individuals are apprehended, make sure that those defendants get their day in court, where the government makes their burden. It's then the Marshal Service who takes over, having to house, transport, make sure there's a safe environment in the court. It's the court staff and the judges. So this is a group effort. There are some groups that aren't represented here today who, once these individuals enter the criminal justice system, a lot of work, along with our support staff, goes into making sure we prove each and every element for each and every defendant. But I thank all of you, members of the media, for being here and covering real news and real stories. Each one of these guns, I'm sure, tells a different story, and I'm just very thankful that they're now zip-tied and in evidence and not concealed and on the streets.
Any other questions?
I have one more. In addition to the 20 convictions, are there other arrests that have been made that just haven't gone through the system yet? And if so, how many?
Yeah, so what we try and do, or what we're really careful of, is not to talk about ongoing cases. So we made a big point, because, as I mentioned before, individuals are innocent until proven guilty. Arrest is just based on probable cause. So today we're just going to confine our comments to those who have been adjudicated guilty. But as you heard from Special Agent in Charge Benedict, there are more arrests to come. There are more people to go through the system. But today, because we're talking about it, we don't want to talk about an ongoing case, just the 20 individuals who've been apprehended.